I'm Katie Moran,
And I'm MJ Coppola.
and we're sharing an 11-part mindful mental health miniseries called Rintiki. We're sharing 11 reasons not to kill yourself. It started as a blog post, YouTube video, and now a Discord community where we host gratitude challenges. Episodes will be coming out Tuesdays and Thursdays between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. Welcome to the episode about your life has meaning. So this is one of my favorite reasons because I think we can really go from a place where we feel lost and lonely to a place where we know we're in solidarity with other people and we live a life of service. So I just want to recognize that you are meant to be here. Your life has meaning. Even if you feel like life is meaningless, that is not true. Your life has purpose and you need to keep going to find it.
Absolutely. I want to share that we did the first one, our first episode, and that one really hit me in that you don't need to inherently do anything to matter in this world. And I think human nature, we look for reasons why we're here. I mean, it's like the oldest like question in the book, per se. And we can, I think the fun thing is that we can decide, we can choose, like we have cognitive thoughts and we can choose the way we decide to go in a direction. So I'm really excited for this episode.
Me too. And I think this is perfect for those people who do feel lost or lonely. Because there are different ways to find meaning and fulfillment or joy in life, and it's available to everyone. So when I think about it, I think of the Viktor Frankl quote, and the quote is, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." And for me, that really shows that it's not so much what you do, but it's how you do it. And you can do anything that really brings you to a place of happiness. And I think it's so important to recognize that when we decide we're going to be the people that we want to be, that's when we can really change our life for the better. And just recognizing in yourself that you can choose to find freedom, you can choose to find that last freedom within you to be optimistic and to really create hope that even if you might not feel like it all makes sense now, to have that faith that it will make sense later. And really, this is kind of like my formula to kind of like rebuild your life. So I had a mental health relapse and I used this to rebuild my life for the second time. But the first time, I've really used this to like get my life together. I was not going to any of my classes. I was partying too much. I was having many suicide attempts. And this is what got me into grad school. It got me to really become someone who was more effective, more efficient, and productive. And I think it's so important for people to recognize because a lot of people see me now as someone who's kind of like more put together, but I just want to let everyone know that it's like anyone can kind of like take these kind of like attributes and values and really transform their life. And I know for me, it meant so much to me that I was able to do this. And I've done it twice. And every time I feel like something is off, I go back to this and I ask myself, at what stage am I really not being authentic? And I just want to share that with you now. So it's called the Arches method, and it stands for alacrity, resilience, conviction, heart, education, and service. So alacrity, what excites you; resilience, what drives you; conviction, what do you stand for; heart, what matters to you; education, what skills can you acquire to serve others in a meaningful way; and service, how can you help others in a meaningful way. So, in terms of alacrity, I think this is so important because you look to what excites you. And for me, it was writing and helping others. And that's why I studied social work. So, when I was doing clinical practice for my first internship and research for my second internship, it was something I really loved. And it allowed for me to connect with other people on that. So it gave me a sense of community and also it gave me a sense of purpose. And I think it's so important that you don't miss this one step, because doing something that excites you is more important than I think any of us realize. And alacrity is really this cheerful readiness and being eager. So I think it's so important that we wake up ready to do something. And this really goes back to the Viktor Frankl, The Last Freedom for me, because I think it's so important to recognize that it's like our attitude that changes our perspective, and really our attitude becomes contagious. So if we enjoy what we're doing, the people around us will enjoy what they're doing. And I think that's so powerful. So when I think about resilience, like no matter what you do, you have to be resilient in it because there will be obstacles. And then having conviction, I think, is something that fortifies your faith in what you can do. So knowing where boundaries are is so important, and saying that I love this thing, but I'm not willing to do it under this set of circumstances, or I love this thing, but I'm not willing to do it when, say, people disrespect me in this way. And I think it's so important, that sense of conviction, that not only you know what you stand for and your values are, but you use that as a way to protect yourself by creating boundaries. And I think this is something that a lot of people miss, because a lot of people find these things that they love and they love to do, but they actually get lost in it, and they'll be like, oh, I'll do this under any set of circumstances. But sometimes it's not healthy, and sometimes it doesn't give you the joy that it really should, and it could lead to burnout. It could lead to, again, feelings of isolation or loneliness, and it really can deteriorate your sense of excitement and your sense of eagerness to do it. So I just want to recognize that it's important to have conviction and to know under what set of circumstances do you enjoy doing this thing, and to set those boundaries, because it's so important that you take care of yourself, whether it's from burnout or it's from just energy leaks from that's doing damage to your self-esteem or your well-being. Be aware of that. And then the next step, heart, what matters to you. I think this is so important, because if something doesn't matter to you in the long haul, you really will stop doing it. And I think this comes after setting up boundaries, because you have to know what are your exceptions to the boundaries, and you have to have a purpose for having those boundaries and enforcing those boundaries. So it's one thing to set a boundary, but enforcing your boundary, your heart has to be in it, and you have to know that that boundary matters to you. So that's just something that can protect you from burnout, that can protect you from compassion fatigue, and it can allow for you to do something so well that other people are inspired by it. And this is where education comes in. So, what skills can you acquire to serve others in a meaningful way? And this really goes back to the Carol Dweck mindset. So, having a growth mindset, knowing that you might not have every skill you need to be the person you want to become, but it's really in acquiring skills that you can grow into that, and that you don't have to be extraordinary to acquire a skill. You just have to be willing to do focus and discipline work. So, I'd love to hear MJ talk a little bit about education.
Yeah, so we were kind of talking about this earlier, how I want to give a really good example of this. First, I want to go back to a couple things that you said, because I want to address my own like experience in those things. I have pretty much always had, as long as I can remember, my stomach is, I'm like literally still in the process of figuring out like what's wrong, basically, physically. But so I know that if I eat certain foods, or if I get too stressed out, like my food will not process in a way that's helpful. And then that basically, in turn, affects my mood throughout days. A really good example is like if I drink like alcohol or something. I've noticed a pattern of the day after alcohol drinking, I'm lethargic and tired, but the day after that, I become really angry. So it's not the day of, it's 2 days after. It's how my body processes that particular stuff. And so I know that I have to be really careful about that. So going into what the Arches method, like I know if I'm really gonna sit down and try to figure something out, that I have to be nice to my body in order to be in a mental state that allows me to really be present for sitting down and doing these activities. And it doesn't have to be, you could start wherever you feel that way. But I always tell people, like, if you feel like something is like, God, what? Like, one of the things I used to ask myself all the time when I was a kid, when I was in high school, is like, why do I keep going through these cycles? Like, why does it feel like happy for this amount of time and sad for this amount of time? And like, it just continues. Like, it's not, I'm always happy, I'm always sad. And it, you kind of like start that way. And throughout the years, I started to like really notice the patterns, and then I did the work to figure out like what the patterns was. And it's a long process, but I started there. And the you had said something about how like almost like your mood does affect people around you. So, you said about the heart, like what matters to you, and boundaries. And um a really great place where I started with boundaries was my self boundaries. So I love writing. And when I started to really get into that, like addictive thing where you're like, oh, I found this thing that I really like, whatever it is, right? And we can just say poetry. I love writing poetry. So I kind of refound my love for poetry. And that's like all I wanted to do all the time was write, like for a while. But that's not all I could do, because one of my boundaries at the time was that I wasn't going to be doing this for anybody else but me. So I still had to like make money and do the things, to like live. I had a family and I had to do those things. And so there had to be boundaries there where I cared for my family, my daughter, and, my own self, along with the things that I love. And so, I would set boundaries like, okay, like I like writing at night. So I will twice a week tell my family I'm gonna go to bed early and write like in bed. And it was just something that I could do that without one feeling bad, because it was just me going to bed early, like if I didn't feel good or something. So I would go to bed early, and I would write instead, and it would be my own time. And it kind of hit all of the, mm, it checked all the boxes where it was an accountability practice for myself that I could maintain because it was small enough to maintain it. And also, it wasn't really negatively affecting the rest of the family because everything was already done for the day and things were already there, so it was like it kind of checked all the boxes of um the word I'm looking for, a word that I can't find because I decided not to have coffee before we did this. um but anyway, it was something I was able to maintain, and it was a good place to start for boundaries, because and then what that did was kind of show me that I could still show up for myself and not destroy everyone around me by putting these boundaries up. And that kind of morphs throughout time, right? That brings me to the education, where for as long as I can remember, when I was working, I felt trapped. Like, it's just something for me that I've always felt like I wanted to run my own business, and I always felt like trapped in the corporate world and all of that. And I think a lot of it was just the people that I worked around in the industry. But I've found, and talked to someone recently who kind of pointed out a similar situation, that the skills that I acquired while I was having those experiences in work are valuable skills, like customer service and admin work and marketing skills. And that stuff to me now still feels very, very, some of that feels like raw. It feels ugly, some of it, some of those skills. And inherently, like by themselves, the skills themselves aren't bad skills. They're great skills. Like, could make you tons of money. However, those skills to me are still kind of attached to that corporate life where I was for lack of a better like visual, to me, it felt like I was in this cage, in this cubicle cage, forced to be running the rat wheel, doing these skills. So when I was trying to use them for my business after I left that, every time I would use those skills, I would feel very similar to how I felt when I was in this like little corporate box. And someone pointed out to me that maybe there's a separation that needs to happen. Maybe we walk away from those set of skills for the time being. And maybe when you are ready to heal, or when that healing process of whatever made you feel trapped in that atmosphere starts to dissipate, you can come back to those skills. And I want to point that out because I feel like one of the things that I felt really strongly about when I was trying to force myself to do that stuff was this like, why do I feel like I was so angry about it? I was so angry. I was like, I want to use these things for this and I just can't get out of my own way. Like, you know, and it's okay to sit and, you know, if you feel comfortable sitting down with somebody, you know, a therapist, a coach, somebody to be like, I feel unnecessarily angry, or it feels like these emotions shouldn't be attached to these things, or it's holding me back. And I think that's where, when we get help from somebody to point out those things to us, because it wasn't until someone pointed it out to me that I really noticed that I was attaching that feeling of being trapped, which was also attached to a lot of stuff from my childhood and a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse and all of that stuff attached to these skills that I had acquired and learned in an environment that was also triggering those same things. So as I healed personally from those things, still dealing with them, but still in the process, I've started to reacquire or reintroduce those skills in a more healthy, controlled environment. So I wanted to really bring that up because it's something that I'm actually currently dealing with. And also, I feel like sometimes we can feel, when we try to acquire skills and educate ourselves, we miss the step sometimes of, we feel like we have to learn a certain skill set. And so we try to force ourselves to learn that. And it's okay if you don't feel like it doesn't resonate with you. And if you're not learning it, like I just sent a meme to my friend the other day. It was like, how many times can you read a page before you finally just put the book down because you're like, I'm just not concentrating today. And if you feel like that, maybe it is this thing, this trauma that it's not apparent about this skill, or maybe it's just simply it's not something that you're interested in, and that's okay too. Without going into the business side of it, you can, this is why it's nice to have co-creation. It's nice to have a community. You can find a community that maybe you can swap skills with somebody. Someone can do that skill that you don't like to do. I'm a bookkeeper by trade, and somebody does my books. Like, I don't want to do my books because it's just, that's where I am. It's just where I am right now. And it took me a really long time to feel like I wasn't an imposter because I didn't like to do my own books. It took me a lot. It took me therapy sessions to go through that and really feel comfortable saying, I just don't want to do my own. And that's totally okay. It's okay to be where you are. It's okay to feel like the skill that you are doing or trying to acquire just doesn't hit you. And it's also okay to feel in the beginning of acquiring a skill that you're, for lack of a better term, I always feel really dumb in the beginning of learning a skill because we're learning and we don't know the things. And if you're like me and you're like all or nothing, you're like, I need to know everything all at once. And it's unfortunately not, it doesn't work like that. So it's okay to feel those things. And if you need to go slow to give yourself an emotional break while you're learning some of these things, that's okay too. So I just wanted to share that experience because that education is so important to me. I learn something every day. It's something that I've put into my own routine, and I still run through all of the feelings that I just talked about. Like, I still run into roadblocks. I'm like, why is it so hard to learn this thing? And just want to point out that sometimes it's attached to trauma and we don't even realize it. So
Yeah, I had a similar experience in college. I had wrote a suicide note, and one of my friends found it after I had thrown it out. And actually, like, she had called the police, and it was like it turned into like this big thing, and I was actually already at a hospital to do an inpatient stay after a session with my psychologist because she was very concerned for me. And it was hard for me to write papers that year, to put anything down on paper, because it seemed like all the pain inside of me people would see if I put anything out there. And I think that's something I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. And now I do write about a lot of topics that I think probably come from that pain, and it's not in the way that I feel broken from it. Like, now I have this saying, I forget where I heard it, but speak from your scars and not your wounds. And for me, like, I remember when writing was a wound for me, because I just felt like if I wrote something, people would see all of my pain. And I think now when I do that, I think when I talk about my pain, when I write about my pain, other people see themselves in it. And I think some people do see my pain in it, and they empathize with it or sympathize with it sometimes. And it's not something that makes me want to hide anymore. It's something, and we'll get into this in the next one, but it's a way for me to serve other people. And the last step of that Arches method is service. So how can you help other people in a meaningful way? And when I started doing content about the things I've been through, it really transformed how I saw my own life. And all the time I get comments about people who are suicidal. I have messages from people who are suicidal. And I think one of the most important things that, if I could share with anyone, is there's so many people who message me that say they were suicidal and now they're grateful to be alive. There's people who talk to me when they were suicidal and they thank me for being there for them when they were, and they say that they're happy now, which just is so important to, I think, share with other people, that that feeling doesn't have to last forever. And I think sometimes we get stuck in this idea that being suicidal is a way of life that we'll never escape, and it's just not true. And for me, connecting with other people who have felt that way reminds me that so much of it, we go through the same things. Like, it's like I felt so alone in my suicidal ideation, but now that I see that other people had the same thoughts, had the same feelings, like, it really transformed the way I saw it. And when I'm stuck in those emotions, I think I am in it alone, but I know that other people feel that same way. And I know that it's something that I can get out of, and that I'm not trapped there forever. And just in terms of service, I think every time, like, when I post something, um, which is something that I think is really, really personal, I always get people who can relate. Like, I remember I was ghosted over the summer by someone I was talking to for like 6 months to a year, and it was like really heartbreaking for me. And I posted about it, and a lot of other people said, because of this post, I got closure from something that happened a long time ago to me. And I just remember thinking that, this was really hard for me to put out there, because it still felt almost like a wound. But
mm,
immediately when I saw other people got closure from it, because I didn't share it when it was a wound, I started healing from it, and I did heal from it without hearing from this person. But healing from it allowed for me to share my insight about it. And I think when you talk from a scar, not a wound, it's really, you do it in service of other people, and you talk about the feelings, you talk about what happened, and then you talk about what you learned from it. And I think it's really those lessons that not only do we have education to acquire skills, but we have education to really turn our wounds into scars and to heal things. And I think it's the same process for healing, is that we actually educate ourselves on what happened and we take those lessons and we kind of like allow for it to be a way to serve other people. And I don't think there's anything I've ever been through that I haven't been able to help someone else go through after I went through it. And just this idea that pain is never wasted. And I am so glad that I could live a life now, which I never would have imagined when I was like self-isolating and suicidal, that I connect with so many people through that pain. And whether a lot of times I talk about sexual assault and healing from sexual assault, and a lot of people talk to me about like sexual abuse they've experienced. And it just is a reminder to me that like everything we go through is something someone else has been through. And a lot of the times we feel our pain is so unique, but it's really in connecting with other people. And this is what I love about fiction, is it feels like a safe way to connect with these topics. And that helped me through my own journey, whether it be The Color Purple or I think that was like the big one that really helped me get through what I was going through. And I think it's so important that we recognize that we're not really alone on our journeys. And like you say, that Rumi quote, we're all walking each other home. I think it's so true. And I just want to share the Martin Luther King Jr. quote: not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great, because greatness is determined by service. And that idea that we all can serve other people. And I think, especially for my audience, all the writers, I know how many times I coach someone and they say they just want to be the next J.K. Rowling. And I just think to myself, just like it kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because it's like this idea that writers have to hit some sort of pinnacle of fame, and that's like the ideal, I don't know, like end point for people. And like in my
Yeah.
head, it's like, I think to myself, like, it's like, no, it's like those little tiny steps that you take, that you put a message out there and someone relates to it and it brings someone healing. And I think to myself, just like, if you ever like skip to like, if you have a dream that is so far in advance and it is an end point, like that breaks my heart, because it's really those things, like it's like every step of the way, like every step of the ladder, every step of the staircase. And for me, it's like every comment I get that someone relates to something I said, or every time someone reads my book and says, I cried at this part. And, it means so much to me, specifically when people who hold their emotions in say that they were emotional over something, whether it be that I posted or something that I wrote in a book. It just means so much to me, because that's why I write. And I think like, if I had one thing I would say to like people in terms of like coaching, is that like it really is every step of the way that matters, and that's what makes it worth it. And it's not some end point that feels like all of your problems will be solved, because that's not the truth of fulfillment and having meaning in your life. And I think for anyone who could just feel like they get to that end point, it'd feel meaningless. And I know a lot of people are suicidal because of real circumstances in their life that are less than ideal. And I just want to say to people that even without those circumstances, it's so important to recognize that there's so much meaning that you can find in your life. And you don't have to have a perfect life to have your life be meaningful. And that's the one thing that I really hope people can leave this episode with.
Yeah. Is like one of the things that really resonated with me when you were talking just now is this. One of our friends says it all the time. He's like, process-based goals, not point-based goals. So if we have a goal, so say like you want to be a famous writer, amazing. Like keep that, wake up every day and be like, I am going to be that person. Like you could start to identify as that person, like as you go through your goals process. But really focusing on, I know, like I could already see the eye rolls, but it really is about the journey. And honestly, this is one of the things that I'm going to speak loosely about the subjects. I don't know a lot about it, but I can see in music industry and somewhat in like the acting community as well, is that once you get this like these big roles and you get to this like high accomplishment, or like you do get that like, you know, J.K. Rowling's or Stephen King status where you're just like an amazing, and that's great. But like, now what after that? So that's sometimes that's what happens. And with that, as you get to the end of your goal, and like I know personally I've had this happen to me where I've gotten a goal and it's accomplished, and now I'm sitting there like, oh, okay, now what? And some of my own depression has come from a place of that silence after the goal has happened, or after you've reached that thing. And one, first of all, it's okay to be there. um it's okay to be in that space, to have that, like, I know we all don't like the feeling of that like emptiness, the void. It's ugly and yucky. But if you are, and if we are basing our goals off of a learning or a process based thing, and we achieve that goal, we can always strive for something else afterward, especially if we're keeping in mind that it's service. We're serving ourselves, others, something higher than us, or whatever you want to think, you know. I think it's important to note that it's really, really awesome to like move towards a goal and keep that in mind, and and you know, start to pick that apart and identify as that, but also recognize that like we need that celebration after that goal is acquired. And what was that purpose of that goal, to really keep that purpose in mind. And service is a really great way to not hit so much of a crash after we've accomplished the thing. And I know that seems like, for some people, and sometimes me too, it feels like such a thing, like I'll worry about that when it comes. But really, like like I tell some of the people that I coach, not only in the business realm but in the personal realm, that like it's really great to have the goal, like I said, but we're being present with the process now. Like if it takes you 3 years to accomplish a goal, do you really want to be miserable for those 3 years? So service is like an amazing way. Like, you learn, I don't think it's a coincidence that you learn best when you acquire skills, when you're teaching those same skills you're trying to acquire. I don't think that's a I don't think that's a coincidence at all. I think that goes very well into that sort of whole service as a way to this whole thing, because we're serving as we're learning, and that in turn creates momentum to get to that goal. So
Yeah, and I think there's kind of like this false conception people have that you need a specific skill to serve people, and that it has to be something that is really powerful. And I just want to say I've served people when I didn't have skills, and what that was for me, I went to a food bank, and I like just help them prepare the food and give the food out. And the thing is, like, what was so meaningful for me was there was someone there who had said to me that they were thinking about quitting, and just kind of like to see like my optimism there, to see like my positivity in like kind of like telling everyone like I hope you enjoy your meal. They said that was like so refreshing, and they said that I was an answer to their prayers, which like I think like I feel like there's few things more meaningful that someone can feel, um that you like help them connect to source, is I think something that's just so powerful for me, that someone you could help someone increase their faith, and that you do that in service of a higher purpose. Not that anyone needs to be particularly religious, but just that someone needs to have faith that they can serve in a way that helps more than just themselves. And I think that's a part of selflessness that is so important. And actually, it was funny. He said about the first day that I was there, he thought I wasn't going to ever come back because I like had cut something and I used like the wrong knife to cut it, and the chef came in and like yelled at me for like using the wrong knife. And he was like, yeah, like the people who are here, they like don't like when you use this knife because it like it shows like the marks of the knife, and you have to use this knife. And I was like, I think it'll be okay, I'll just tell them I used the wrong knife. And he was like so fed up, and he just like walked away because he was like just forget about it. And I think so much of the time, like, we underestimate the impact we can have on people. And like, I really had no problem with like telling people I made a mistake. And like, that's the truth, is that we fear the consequences of not being good enough, of being an imposter, of not having the right skill set. And like, apparently that day I didn't have the right skill set and I didn't know which knife to use. But that didn't stop me from making an impact that day. And I helped everyone there with like their food, and I did my part. And I think it wasn't so much the people there that really reminded me of how much of an impact I made. It was really the people who worked there who felt like everything was the same day in and day out, that it was the same energy, that everything was like almost hopeless in a way. And I think it's so important to recognize that you never know how you're going to impact people just with your positivity, or just with having some sort of optimism or hope. And I think sometimes the biggest impact we can have is to give other people hope. And it doesn't matter if we have the right skills. Like, I know I'm talking about like gain a skill so that you can help people, but at the end of it, like, you can't be a perfectionist about like, and you got into this a little bit too when you were talking about it. Like, you don't have to learn it all at once. You don't have to like have the perfect skill set. Like, it's okay to still be learning. And I think it's so important to recognize that we don't have to be perfect to make a difference, and that most of the time we give other people an opportunity to be their best selves when we show our imperfections. And I saw a video recently, and I can't remember who it's from, but they said that a mark of someone who's a good person isn't that they're perfect, it's their ability to have grace with other people's imperfections. And I thought that
Mhm.
was so beautiful, because a lot of the times on social media, specifically because I'm always trying to make a difference on social media, and I think it can do good, even though a lot of people demonize it. And it's powerful for me to see people who just disagree with me and scroll past, or disagree with me and have grace with that disagreement, and be like, I just don't feel the same way, but I understand how you could feel this way. Or people who will message me that they don't agree with something I said and want to talk about it. And then I get people who show hate. And I think like sometimes that's the hardest part about being vulnerable, is that people will pick apart every little thing that you feel is imperfect about you. But it's really not that, like, people criticizing you does not make you a bad person. And I think that's so important to remember. And it's really how we behave, like, with other people and their imperfections, that show who we truly are.
Mm. I think one of the reasons why I love holding space for other people, first of all, didn't realize that was my superpower till like well into my 30s. People like always tell me like I have the greatest like grounding energy. It makes no sense to me because my brain is not there. Okay, so but I think what's great about that is just being. A lot of times, like you were saying, like this place I used to work at, I would just come in, do my job, and go home. And I did some admin work. And I remember one time, one of the employees came in to the office, and he was like, asked me something about his payroll check or something. And we went over it and we talked about it, and then he left. And I don't think we really resolved anything. I don't think it was just a question of just like, what is this or whatever. The next day, I got a message from him that was like, I just want to let you know, because I know sometimes our boss can be really harsh or hard, but I want to let you know that you in the office, whether the crew knows it or says it or not, just having you around is really helpful, because it's nice to have somebody who's going to be there to answer the questions, whether they know it or not. Just having your presence be there is enough for us to be relieved that if something goes wrong, or even if nothing goes wrong, there's always somebody there that will hold space. And I say hold space, but I mean, you know, in that instance, it was about me just being there to answer the call or answer the email or direct somebody in a direction. And that can be super impactful for people. Like you showing up that day and saying to that person, like, I hope your meal is good. Like, you have no idea what that person had gone through that day. I have no idea what the crew go through or what they were going through, like on their daily basis in their personal lives. And just being there, showing up, and not like, man, I made so many mistakes in that job. And that was the job I really learned how to own everything that I did, because I knew that there was a skill set higher that I was trying to acquire. And in order to do that, I really had to do the things and make the mistakes. And the quicker I owned, oh crap, that was not right. The quicker I owned that and said that, the less time I had to sit with the yuck of what the heck am I going to do now that I made a mistake. And I learned how to address those quicker instead of sitting in that what if yuck pool. I guess that's the way to call it. And so I want to go back to that. Even yesterday's, like, you don't even really have to do anything. Like, just being sometimes is enough. Just having, like, existing in a space and having somebody know that you exist is enough.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to get into next, is this idea that even though there's this method that has helped me find meaning in my life, and that I've seen other people find meaning from just answering these questions and following the framework and living their life to the fullest, I want to let everyone know that you don't have to earn self-worth, and that you don't have to do these things to have worth in your life, and that your life is meaningful just because you exist, and that you have self-worth just because you exist, and it's inherent. And these are just things that really have helped me in my life build a life I was proud of, build a life I was happy with, build a life that brought me fulfillment. And I don't want anyone to be like, oh, I don't have the energy to do that, so my life is meaningless. That's not true. Your life is so meaningful. And even if you don't do these things, who you are matters. Who you are is something that is beautiful and is a gift to this world. And even when I get hate comments, I never think that person is worthless or meaningless. Just think that person doesn't understand what I've been through, and that person doesn't understand how to be there and hold space for other people. And those are skills. And I just want to say that you don't have to do anything to prove you deserve to be alive, because that's not what significance is. And you can be significant to the people in your life. You could be significant to yourself, and just service is a way that you can help other people feel better, and how you can help other people find things that matter to them. And I think this is kind of like a framework to find fulfillment, but you don't have to do anything to have self-worth, and you don't have to follow a framework to have self-worth. And that's one thing that I want people to take away from this, is that no one is more capable than them. I think we think that some people can do amazing things because they're extraordinary, and I just don't think that's true. I think it's you put in the work, you try to do something that is meaningful for yourself and meaningful to other people, and sometimes that can look like it's out of reach. And I just want to tell everyone that I believe in them and that you can make your life fulfilling to the point that you feel fulfilled. And you don't have to be anyone special to do that, even though I think everyone is special in their own way.
Absolutely. It's one of the podcasts I've watched and listened to forever. One of our mutual groups that we're a part of. And he always says, Tom Bilyeu, that he was the laziest person. You know, he's like, I'm not the person, like, I don't know how many years ago that you would have thought owns a whatever company, you know, $1 million company or whatever. And sometimes I feel like that about myself. I'm like, if I went back 20 years and asked my like 20 something year old self way back in the day, like, all right, where do you think you're going to be in 20 years? I probably would have been like dead. And so, because I didn't have what I have now, but I really truly, and it doesn't matter what age you are. Honestly, you could be 70 years old and decide that that's what you're gonna start your journey to becoming the best pro bono lawyer ever. Like, just it is okay to restart. First of all, I know that from experience right now. It's what I'm doing. And it's okay to just be. It's your existence on this planet is enough, and there is still so much room for improvement to be the best ever. You don't necessarily have to be born with this like superpower. You can acquire the superpower. So,
Normally, I say, is there one thing you want to leave everyone with? But I think this is the most important message that we can share about this today. And the next episode is going to be There Are People You've Never Met, which I'm so excited about because that was one of the reasons that was impactful to someone I really care about. And they messaged me and they said they were really sad over the weekend, but they thought about that reason, that there are people they've never met, and they said it helped them hold on. And I can't wait to do that one.
it's just another, that was one of my favorite ones too. In the
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, everyone.